G'day poker people, welcome back. In the last video I drove 4 hours south to sunny Hollywood, Florida, where I was looking to mix in some cash game action at the seminal Hard Rock Hollywood. Despite a lovely experience prior to grinding any volume in the cash games, the poker tables weren't quite as friendly to me, and I definitely copped more than my fair share of run bad to kick the trip off. Despite this, I was not discouraged at all because it was Friday night in Hollywood and I was definitely keen to mix in some cash game action on the absolute goated night for it. So I got to the poker room at about 6 PM and already this was a massive mistake. The lists were ginormous for every single game. I hopped on the 2-5 list. I was 55th on the list. On the 1-2 as well, I was 109th on the list. There was a 10-25 game running and there was only 15 people on that list. So I was very tempted to put my name on that, do a little bit of a shot take, but ultimately I decided against it just because I've been running bad all week and my confidence wasn't the highest it could possibly be. And if you are going to shot take, you absolutely want to be going in with a lot of confidence as well as not wanting to expose yourself too much financially. And I definitely wasn't keen to go on another 30k downswing, and I also wasn't keen to play what would have probably been 10, 25, 50, knowing that most bigger games usually play with a mandatory straddle. So ultimately decided against it, and my nitty ass had to wait a full 2 hours before I finally got called for the 1-2 game. Played that for yet another hour before I finally got in a 2-5 game. So that is a total of 3 hours of waiting to play some 2-5. But now I'm finally in the mix where I play this first hand. Let's get into the action. First hand up, a loose aggressive under the gun makes it 20, and then I'm in the cutoff. I look down. Pocket kings, let's go. I go ahead and 3-bet this absolute monster to 70. Then the action folds back to the under the gun player who decides 70 is not enough. They go ahead and 4-bet it to 175. So now the action's back on me here, and honestly, I think we have a pretty clear decision to call here. We have position in the hand, so I'm probably never going to be 5-betting anyway, even if I did have aces. Maybe there's some merit if you think your opponent's not going to be able to fold like offsuit ace-king, or you think they're capable of 6-bet bluffing. I think the standard play is to call, and that's what I did, and I'm pretty happy with that decision, to be honest. So we go heads up to a flop, which is 6-5-5 rainbow. Opponent goes ahead and c-bets 150, and in this spot I could see raising now to try and get value from like pocket queens or pocket jacks before an overcard comes and scares them off, but I do wonder if there is more EV in just flatting and keeping the opponent's bluffs in their range. I definitely could see them c-betting with pretty much all of the ace-king combinations. They decide to 4-bet pre-flop, and if they do have like a really loose 4-bet like ace-4 suited, we really just want to give them the rope to go ahead and continue to barrel off and protect our range when we do have a hand that is one of those like pocket jacks, pocket tens. So I throw in the call, and then we're heads up to a turn, which is the 7 of diamonds putting out backdoor diamonds, and then the opponent goes ahead and rips it all in for 675. We really only lose to pocket aces and maybe like ace-5 suited that 4-bet bluffed, but we really would be too nitty to fold the second strongest hand we have in our range here. I guess we get our pocket sevens maybe, but yeah, definitely not going to be folding the kings against a loose aggressive opponent. I throw in the call, and then the opponent doesn't show right away. The river is the 8 of clubs, and then they turn over pocket aces. God damn it. First hand on the Friday night, we end up getting cooled for the maximum, aces versus kings. Let's see if we can turn the luck around in this next hand. Before we get into the next hand, I just wanted to take this opportunity to invite all of you to join the Anti-Gambling Gambling Club. Head over to lebets.com. We have a bunch of different anti-gambling gambling club t-shirts, hats, and hoodies in all different types of sizes and colors. So head over to lebets.com and join the club. But for now, let's get back into the gambling. A passive button just open limps, and then a loose aggressive small blind goes ahead and raises to 20, and then I'm in the big blind with king 10 of clubs. I 3-bet it up to 70, the button folds and the small blind calls. So it heads up to a flop of 9-9-8 with 2 hearts. The opponent checks it over to me here, and I think probably the best play is to just c-bet bluff here. We do have a lot of backdoor equity with our straight outs and not a huge amount of showdown value with king high. In game I decided to check. It's a bit passive, but I don't think it's the worst play in the world either. The opponent definitely has a lot of strong hands that can call in this board. I don't think any pairs pairs are folding, so it could go either way. I decided to check in this instance, and we get the free turn, which is a good one. It's the king of diamonds. Then something interesting happened because the opponent actually bets out into us. They go ahead and make it 75. When we turn top pair here, there's nothing to do but call. Definitely a lot of semi-bluffs the opponent can have on this board. I mean, there's 2 flush draws out there, so I go ahead and throw in the call. So we see that river, which is the Jack of Hearts. Not the best river in the world, to be honest. Front door flush gets in, as does Queen 10, and the opponent goes ahead and bets 150. So now the action's on me here, and this is a pretty gross spot. I really don't think the opponent is betting any worse hand for value. I'm just really worried because we lose to flushes, we lose to trips, we lose to king queen, and maybe ace king, although I think that hand might 4-bet most of the time. King jack as well. We just lose to so many hands on this run out. I mean, it is a loose aggressive opponent, so if anyone's gonna bluff here, it would be them. I guess I would have to put them on 6-7 suited. There's not hearts, maybe ace 10 of diamonds, something like that. But yeah, I think it's a narrow range compared to what their value is here. So it's lead bets or is it lead folds? Because I make a fold with the top pair on the river. Let me know what you think about the fold in the comments below. So 5 hours after the hand, I'd been pretty card dead in what was honestly a slow game. But I spent that 5 hours just paying attention to the rest of the table and how they were playing hands. And I came to the ultimate conclusion that playing tight is right, because people were not folding even the most ridiculous like backdoor gut shots like 7 deuce pre-flop. So yeah, the next time I was going to VPip a hand, it was definitely going to have to be a premium because I was going to get action. So in this next hand, a tight aggressive low jack just open raises to 65. No straddle, it's a regular 2-5 game. They just went ahead with the good old 13x open, then a tight aggressive hijack calls, and the action folds to my button, and I have ace queen offsuit. So yeah, this is already a pretty gross spot against just calling 13x opens is just on general principle. So don't like that option. So it becomes whether I should 3-bet or fold. And I really think folding just is a better play. Like, people have been calling absolutely anything pre-flop, and now this guy who is a tight aggressive player has just gone ahead and bombed it, like absolutely bombed it pre-flop. I think it's very, very likely that they have an absolute premium. The ace king and then all the pocket pairs like jacks plus and ace queen just has absolutely awful equity against that range. Even getting to play the pot in position, I just wouldn't like the dynamic. So ultimately I decided to fold the ace queen there. Yet again, another nitty fold in this video in particular, but I like it against the ranges I think are pretty tight. So I fold, and then the small blind and big blind both call the 65. So apparently I was the only one in the mood for folding here, but those 4 went to a flop of jack 9 deuce with 2 spades. The blinds check it over to the original raiser, who goes ahead and c-bets 80, and the hijack decides that's not enough. They raise it up to 200. Then the small blind, who was sitting next to me, actually leans over. He shows me his cards, and he had pocket eights. And then he kind of like looks annoyed, but he ultimately decides to fold the pocket eights. But then the big blind actually decides to call the 200, and the pre-flop raiser decides to fold. So it's the hijack and the big blind heads up to a turn, which is the 9 of spades, pairing middle pair, and also putting in the front door flush. Big blind checks it over to the hijack, who rips it all in, and then the big blind folds king 10 offsuit face up. So wow, they made a pretty ambitious call on the flop, but see what I mean? You got to play tight because people aren't folding. And then the hijack was actually kind enough to show he did have pocket queens. His hand was absolutely, utterly insane to me, and boy am I glad I got out of the way with my ace queen pre-flop. Next hand, a loose aggressive hijack makes it 20. Then I'm in the cutoff. I have ace 8 suited, definitely not as premium as ace queen offsuit, but having said that, we've been waiting for a strong hand, and this hand is definitely strong enough to get called by people who don't like to fold pre-flop. So I go ahead and 3-bet at 270. Then a loose aggressive small blind rips it all in for 135. Hijack folds, and the action's back on me, and I'm definitely not going to be folding, getting this price. Honestly, wouldn't be shocked if my ace high was good, but even if it's not, I'm at least going to have decent equity against any hand that's not pocket aces. So I throw in the call, and then we're all in, heads up to a run out. The small blind shows king 9 offsuit. I show my hand, so we're in great shape here. Unfortunately, we do lose on the run out. So yeah, our luck definitely hasn't started to turn around in Hollywood just yet. Anyway. Next hand up, we've got the button straddle on, and we see 3 limpers, and the action folds to my cutoff, and I have pocket queens, baby. Let's raise it up. I make it 75, and then only a loose aggressive small blind calls. So it heads up to a flop of 7-4 deuce rainbow, and then the small blind leads out for 100. Now the action's on me. Pretty interesting decision whether we want to raise or just call here. Looking at this hand on paper, I think raising probably is a bit better. A lot of the opponents' one pair hands that decided to lead out probably aren't going to fold to a raise, and some of them might on scare card turns, which is going to be most turns on this board. So I think raising might be a bit better. In game, I decided to just call. My thinking was this guy's going to be bluffing a lot here as a loose aggressive opponent, and I want to give him a bit of rope to hang themselves on the turn. So I did decide to call. I think raising probably is a better play. Regardless, we're heads up to a turn, which is the 10 of spades completing the 4-card rainbow. This slows down the villain a bit. They go ahead and check it over to me. Now I think we have a slam dunk value bet spot here. I go ahead and make it 150, and then the villain calls. So we're heads up to the river, which is the 2 of clubs pairing bottom pair, and now the small blind leads out for 100. Really confusing bet, to be honest with you. I'll be 100% honest, I'm not concerned I'm behind here with pocket queens at all. I'm thinking it's very likely the opponent is blocker betting like pocket 8s or pocket 9s, maybe even like a7, that they just don't want to check call all in, and they're hoping the small bet will slow me down, something like that. I think if they did river a deuce or they slow played a set or 2 pair, they would either check or just go all in. Regardless though, I think we're just free rolling a call at this point, so I stick it all in for 375, and then the opponent calls. I show my pocket queens and the opponent shows pocket 9s, so there you go. They did try to blocker shut down me shoving on the river, but it's not going to work when we have queens here. We get max value and stack our opponent. Let's go! So it was 8 AM at this point, and unfortunately my game broke. And I say unfortunately because it was a phenomenal game if you couldn't tell. And then we drew cards to see who would get seats at the only other 2-5 table that was still running at the time. And I drew the 2 of hearts, and believe it or not, that wasn't high enough for me to get a seat on the new table. Now, 99% of the time when this happens, I usually decide to cash out at the end of the night and just go home and try and sleep it off. But this session was different. Like, I've driven all the way here to Hollywood, and I'm feeling fine. I'm not tired at this point. I don't think I'm tilted in any type of way, and I was pretty keen to continue grinding some volume. So I chips back down. I got a seat on the brand new 1-2 table that was just opening in the morning, and then had my name first on the 2-5 list and just waited until I could get back in that game. After about 45 minutes of playing in that 1-2 game and some complimentary fruit and bag of hippies, I finally get called, and I'm back in the overnight 2-5 game that's still running, which is where I played this first hand. I'm under the gun with another monster, pocket kings. I go ahead and make it 15, and the action folds to the same loose aggressive opponent I've been playing with all night at the other 2-5 table. They go ahead and 3-bet it to 50. The action's on me here. Definitely looking to put more money in the pot with this monster. I go ahead and 4-bet it to 120. The small blind decides 120 is not enough. They go ahead and 5-bet it to 400. So the action's back on me here, and there definitely is the sick thought in the back of my head. The opponent would play aces like this, which is definitely true, but the context is they're a loose aggressive opponent and they've been playing all night. I think it's very likely they're at least tied at this point, if not tilted. So I think their range might be a bit wider than just pocket aces. So I decide to stick it all in for 700 effective, and then the opponent very hesitantly calls the 700, which is what we wanted to see. We didn't want a snapper. I show my pocket kings, and then the opponent shows ace queen offsuit. So we get it in great shape. We're off to a flop, which is a 10-8-4 with 2 diamonds. The opponent doesn't have any diamonds, so we're in really good shape here. Just have to fade the ace and the runner straight outs. The turn is the king of diamonds. So despite us turning a set, I'm actually not in love with this turn card because it just gives the opponent 4 more outs to beat us on the river. And the river is the jack of hearts. So there you go. The opponent does end up winning their pot, realizing their equity despite being a dog. And the opponent actually apologizes to me. I tell him it's all good. Like, I'm just happy that I got it all in a good spot. That's really all you can do in poker at the end of the day. So I can't be too upset about it. Fuck! So there's two people that limp ahead of me in this hand, and then I'm in the big blind with a Jack 9 offsuit. I check it, take the free flop, and I'm glad I did because the flop is a Jack 9-8 rainbow. Let's go, we make 2 pair. The small blind checks it over to me. Definitely looking to put some more money in this pot with a really strong hand for sure. I make it 15, then a passive hijack calls and the small blind folds. So it heads up to a turn, which is the 2 of diamonds, putting out backdoor diamonds. Definitely not going to slow down here. This is actually a great turn card for me if my opponent does have a jack. Probably not going to fold here because I still have top pair, plus as well like 10-9, 9-10 have a pair plus a straight draw, and I think they're going to continue to a large size bet, to be honest, as well, since I have a pair and a lot of equity. So I go ahead and bet 40, and then the opponent calls. So it heads up to the river, which isn't the best. It's the ace of hearts. The reason I say it's not one of the best, we do lose to ace jack now, but more importantly, if the opponent does have king jack or queen jack, they're probably going to be a bit scared of this river. So I'm definitely going to continue to bet to try and get value from those hands, but I need to size down a bit because of the scary river. So I go ahead and make it 50, and then we get put in an interesting spot when the hijack raises to 150. Definitely very concerned about the ace jack combinations. I guess ace 9 and ace 8 are totally impossible as hands the villain could have for value here. Having said that, I think they got some bluffs as well. The 10-8 and the 10-9 hands. I don't really think my opponent has the nuts either. I think that hand probably would have raised earlier. So I was actually leaning slightly more towards call until I looked at the opponent, and the opponent looked just very, very confident, and that kind of like tilted me more towards, okay, I really don't think this guy is bluffing now. If he was like less calm or looks more stressed or something, I probably would have just flicked in the call here. But yeah, I just really didn't think he was bluffing. So I went with my raid. I ended up folding the Jack 9 hand, and then the opponent mucks his cards. So we'll never know for sure or not if the fold was good, but what I was really proud about, almost 15 hours into the session at this point, and I still had the discipline to look at my opponent and just make what I think was a really, really good fold, despite being pretty exhausted at this point. So yeah, I don't know whether the fold was good or not relative to what the opponent's hand was, but I just like how I played this hand in general. After 15 hours and 5 minutes of play, I finally decided to pack things up, cash out, go back to my Airbnb, and finally get some rest after this Mammoth session. It was the longest session I've played since arriving to America by a pretty wide margin, and despite copping what I think at least was more than my fair share of run bad, not only in this session but also across the entire week in Hollywood, I'm just really, really proud with how I played during this session. Not only did I just absolutely smash out the volume with a Mammoth session, but I was playing really well even up to the end when I was tired, making the good disciplined laydowns, using good aggression in certain spots, paying attention to how my opponents were playing, even live tells and stuff like that. So even though this was definitely not one of the best sessions results-wise, I think it might be one of my best performances, honestly, ever in a live cash game, particularly when you factor in the volume. And yeah, I've done vlogs before where I've won thousands of dollars, but I think I might be most proud of just my actual performance in playing the game in this session. We did have one more night in Hollywood booked for the Airbnb, but after I got home, I was so tired that I ended up sleeping pretty much all of Saturday night, and by the time I finally woke up, it was only a few hours before we had to check out of the Airbnb. So unfortunately, this Friday was the last session that I played in the Seminole Hard Rock Hollywood. My mate did have much better results than me in Hollywood. I mean, this was a good place to play poker. It definitely had a lot of action. Despite the long waits for games, once you finally got in a game, it was going to be a lot of action. And if you do run well, I could definitely see these games being very, very profitable. But my mate and I ultimately decided the cost of the Airbnb was just too much for us, particularly now that we had a relationship with the guy who owned the Airbnb that we had in Tampa. We decided to call him up, negotiate a new deal, and actually a better deal financially for us to continue staying there. We talked about maybe like flying to Texas or California, maybe even somewhere further north on the East Coast and checking out the poker rooms there. But honestly, I would have been very against that at this point. I wanted to see Brennan again, and I definitely wasn't ready to give up on what was looking to be a pretty promising relationship at the time. So I definitely wanted to stay in Florida, and with the cheap cost of living we were getting in Tampa, I was pretty happy to continue on in that spot specifically. So we hopped back in my rented Prius, drove another 4 hours north back to our Airbnb in Tampa, and checked in there to see if we could grind out more volume at the Seminole Hard Rock Tampa. To see what happened when we finally got back to Tampa, make sure you hit subscribe because our next video is going to cover my first few sessions back. But for now, I'm out of here. Peace.